Welcome to 404 Cybersecurity Not Found, where we break through the noise of the digital world. Here we dissect the latest security trends, confront emerging threats, and arm you with the knowledge you need.
Welcome back to another episode of 404 Cybersecurity Not Found. In today's episode, we are discussing the hidden and underlying technology that controls most of the systems and services that we currently take for granted. I'm the host of today's episode. My name is Brad, and I'd like to introduce a very special guest on today's episode. We're joined by the infamous Momen Eldawakhly. Momen, say hello.
Hello, Brad. Hello, everybody.
Thank you for joining us.
No
Happy
worries,
to be
man.
here. This is your first podcast.
Yeah, I have done a little bit of talks before, conferences, etc., but no podcasts before. It's my first podcast. Yeah.
Well, you're listening to this Moment's first podcast. I'm honored. Thank you for joining us. It's a little bit of background before we start. Momen and I work together here at Samurai Security. And internally, he's known as, well, many things. Some things I can't say live on air. But he's our chief geek, wizard of hacking. Generally speaking, if it can be hacked, Momen hacks it. But formally speaking, he's our senior penetration tester and attack simulation lead, involved with all the complex and the exciting projects that we have. So today, we're going to be discussing, well, it's a technology that nobody really thinks about on a daily basis. People take it for granted, and those listening may not even know these kind of systems exist and what they do. And it's, generally speaking, operational technology, industrial control systems, and we're going to be talking about the role they play in modern society, and specifically talking and discussing the cybersecurity concerns that we have about them and the potential impact for everyday folk. The reason we're talking about this, it's important because if these things go wrong and there's problems within them, it's not just some data has lost or some company that you've never heard of gets breached like you see in the news, and it doesn't really affect you. These kind of systems will change our lives. And it's a really important topic. There's a lot to talk about. We won't be going too in depth in the technicals today, so not to worry if you've never heard about this technology before, and you're not a tech geek like Momen. But let's start at the high level, so we're all on the same page here. Momen, just talk us through the basics of operational technology and industrial control systems and what they are.
Okay, so first of all, when we think about the OT, the ICS, and SCADA systems, all these terms, at first, we only think about them like, devices or normal devices, or even sometimes you won't ever hear about them because for years they were hidden. Not hidden because, they are dangerous, etc. This is not what I mean at all. I mean hidden by making them not popular, because simply imagine, for example, you visited an oil factory or an energy generator, for example. Okay, you will find a lot of technological device there that you didn't even hear about them before, and that's simply not because they are hidden, but because they are not popular. And SCADA, ICS, OTs in general were not known before, widely known before. But since we had some attacks against critical infrastructures, okay, so then we started to think, so how can somebody cut off the electricity of a whole nation? How can somebody attack the whole oil critical infrastructure of a specific nation, of a specific state, or even country, simply by attacking them from abroad? How this can be possible? And then we introduced to the ICS and the OTs. And that's actually what we are talking about today. The OT itself is the operational technology. Operational technology involves the use, the integration between hardware specific and specially built version of a little bit of a little pieces of electronics together, assembled together to provide or to deliver a specific function. Like for example, the HMIs. You're gonna hear about HMI during your journey in knowing more about OT and ICS. The HMI, simply the human machine interface. That's about it. It's the machine or the device that faces the human to make the human control the infrastructure of the OT. So the OT as a term is the big umbrella that involves the ecosystem between software and hardware to control critical infrastructures or infrastructure or industrial infrastructures in general. That's the OT. The ICS is a subcategory from the OT itself. So the ICS is under the OT. The ICS is the industrial control system, which involves the monitoring and control of the industrial control systems devices, etc., etc. So monitoring the workflow inside a specific industrial infrastructure, etc., etc. Controlling some specific some specific workflows and devices. Like for example, if you are in an infrastructure like an oil infrastructure or fuel and system, for example. So simply you have to have both monitor and control. So the monitor and control together, including the software and the hardware, both of them are actually consists or what covers them is the ICS itself. Finally, which is also another general term here or another specific term that you're gonna hear a lot inside this field, is the SCADA system or the SCADA. The SCADA is simply a software that involves monitoring and control as well. So you hear a lot of monitoring and control, and you may ask yourself, hey, what's going on here? So everything in this field is just monitor and control. So then what's the difference, for example, between this and that, right? So when we talk about monitor and control, or when we list the SCADA systems, okay, so simply we are listing them hierarchy. Like for example, the OT itself is the big umbrella that contains many things underneath it. Okay, one of the things that are actually exists under the OT itself as a general term is simply the ICS itself, okay? And as we already mentioned, the ICS is for monitor and control. So to monitor and to control the system or the hardware or the infrastructure, you have to have some subcategories that simply through them you can do that monitor and control. So for example, you will find the ICS controls the SCADA, and the SCADA itself is used as a bridge to monitor and to control and generally monitor the whole workflows. So for example, you can do logging, you can do some specifics or advanced stuff like, for example, turn leak detection on or off in case of a fueling system, for example, or stuff like that. So yeah, these are the basic terms that introduce you to the world of OT and ICS.
Mm. And for somebody such as myself, Momen, who, in comparison to your technical knowledge, I am an ant in the world of gods. You've gave us a good introduction to the subject there, and you referred to that as the basic terms, and I'm already lost. So I'm sure some of the viewers are also lost as well. But generally speaking, to reiterate that in layman's terms, there are lots of systems involved within giving critical infrastructure, whether it's water, gas, energy. So perhaps it'll make more sense for people to understand if we talk about what are the real world use cases of industrial control systems. So we know things, energy, water, transportation, manufacturing, the list can go on. And it seems that these systems are integral to infrastructural services like providing water to people, providing power to countries, providing transportation to people. So can you give us any specific examples of systems that people will know and be familiar with where ICSs are integrated?
Yeah, sure. So it's very simple, to be honest. It's not complicated at all. Just think about it like that. Imagine that you are in a fueling station, okay, a gas station that you just go there to refuel your car, etc., etc. Okay, to get your electricity or fuel delivered to the place you are in, okay, multiple steps are actually involved. Some of these steps are technological, related to the technology, some of them are not. So, how do you think fuel stations or even, oil industries or fuel management systems are actually working? They are simply have two stuff or two main uh, 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 objects: the human machine interfaces, in which the human can control from, for example, control the oil flow, control the water flow, okay, monitoring if any leak occurred in one of the tanks, for example, etc., etc., these kind of stuff. So simply, generally speaking, it controls the flow of some specific matters inside a specific industry. Like, for example, if you are talking from an oil perspective, as we mentioned, so for example, imagine that you want to control the leak detection of a specific tank inside your fuel system. Okay, so simply to do this, you will have to have a device that controls or that monitors the flow of the oil inside the tanks. Okay, or to place that device in a specific place that can detect the leak when it occurs based on specific statistics or even specific hardware requirements on that specific place. Okay, so simply think about it like that. It controls the life cycle of a critical infrastructure system. Like, for example, if you are talking from an energy perspective, how do you think you can add inverters or even remove inverters from a specific electrical infrastructure? By simply having an OT device placed inside, let's say, an inverter, or placed inside a electrical, for example, system that delivers electricity. Okay, so for example, you can cut off the electricity for some people. For example, these people who don't pay, for example, the electricity bill. So simply from that device, you can just click from your end as a user, which is simply gonna be the human machine interface that you will be interacting with at that time. So what you're gonna do is simply click on that button that cut off the electricity for a specific person or for a specific subscriber to this electricity service, and then your click will be transmitted into signals that controls that specific OT device, okay, that then controls the electricity itself to cut it off or to make it move. So it's that simple. These are the practical examples of the ICS and OT. Imagine them as an IT infrastructure, but for critical infrastructures. For example, in IT, you do have computers, you do have servers, you do have services, etc., etc. Okay, and here, oh, and surely you do have data storages, for example, right? And simply during your journey inside an IT, okay, you will be interacting with the server to get data from and send data to the server itself, etc., etc. You are actually transferring information, right? Think about the ICS and OT the same, but for critical infrastructure. Instead of a data storage, you have, for example, a water tank or a fuel tank, and instead of sending data and receiving data, you are sending signals, receiving signals to perform a specific function, and this function is exist in real world. Like for example, if you are transferring data, it doesn't occur on the real world, right? It just on the bits world, right? The zero and ones. But in critical infrastructure, if you, for example, decided to turn the leak detection off, it will be simply up, simply turned off, right? That's about it. It's not gonna, it's not gonna just only rely on, yes, a data sent, so the data will remain in the computer world. No, it's just gonna be transferred and translated into the real world perspective.
And I'm sure you'll agree, Momen, but a problem of the industry is that there aren't enough people paying attention to cybersecurity as a whole. You see it in the news, and some large company gets hacked somewhere from a very, complex and sophisticated method, and it's like, well, how does that bother my life? It doesn't really matter. And there may be a common misconception that people understand that oil is, mined out of the ground and then refined and delivered and stored at a place. Maybe they just think, well, it's oil or fuel is in a tank underground, and then when I drive up to the pump and I put it in my car and press the button, it's all mechanical, and it's just, I can't think of the word, but just mechanical systems pressure that pushes things out. They may not realize the supply chain of technology that allows them to do these things. They switch the light on in their house, they know that's electrical, but maybe they assume that it's just automatically controlled, and there may not be a system that manages the control and flow of all of this information. And they may think that cybersecurity isn't important to their day-to-day lives because they've got a secure password, or they've got 2FA on their Facebook account, or whatever it may be. Even though that may be the case, these systems control our energy, our water, our transportation, all things that affect our daily lives. And if I just think about some of the worst case scenarios here, given these systems supply everyday technology, we just take it for granted. Of course, when I switch the light on, electricity comes through. We live in a, what's the word I'm looking for? Privileged society where we have access to those things. There are places in the world that don't, of course, but in our world they do. But it seems to me, and temperature check me here, but the potential impact of attacks on these systems could be, potentially catastrophic. I know there are some examples we can talk about later, but some of the worst case scenarios. What are we talking here? Widespread blackouts. People can't access water. If we turned off all technology, we'd go back to the dark ages. No access to clean water, food, or energy. All of a sudden, we can't survive. Is that the kind of almost apocalyptic view in the worst case scenario that could happen if there was a large scale coordinated attack against multiple systems across multiple industries, causing wide scale country or nation disruption, not just for a company? We're talking countries here, not just locations, right? What do you think?
Well, to be honest with you, everything have a catch. Okay, so simply, if you are going to be more technological, controlling everything from your mobile, etc., or even controlling, your smart home, smart city, etc. So simply, this will have a catch. You are all now relying on technology, for example. Okay, so simply, if technology got hacked, just think about it. What will happen if a database got hacked? Simply, you will be able to delete data, you will be able to add data, alter data, etc., and even more, right? Now think, what if your smart home or smart city got hacked? Think about it from all perspectives, water, energy, oil, even cars, etc., okay? And to be honest, when we talk about these kind of stuff, it's gonna be a little bit complex. Not complex because they are hard to understand, but because they are so large. They are very large to just to include in a little bit of, short time. You may literally need hours to talk about them. But in short, imagine if you are, having electricity in your home. You are a good man. You are, paying your bill every month, and you don't have any problem with the electricity provider. Everything is good. But suddenly the electricity cut off. You don't know what's going on. You are trying to open up the lights. You are trying to, you know make anything electrical in this home that you are in right now to work. It doesn't work. So simply think about it like that. You will start calling your vendor, and the vendor telling you, no, everything is good. We don't have any problem with the electricity according to our systems. Okay, but then think about it from the perspective of an attacker. Stealthy compromised the ICS infrastructure, and was able, or IIoT, which is simply the industrial Internet of Things device. Okay, and was able to, for example, stealthy cut off the electricity or remove the electricity subscribers from the system without, you know reflecting that on the human machine interfaces. And by human machine interfaces here, I mean simply the people that you were calling, for example, a representative that has a SCADA system to monitor, to monitor literally everything about the subscribers, etc., etc. Think about it like that. Okay, so from their perspective, now you should have electricity. You don't have any problem with us. Okay, you already billed, and you already paid that build, so everything is good from your perspective. But because of this, simply, literally a civil war could even exist because of that. Okay, because just think about it like this, even from a cyber war perspective, because this actually involves cyber war in a nation want to make a cyber war, or sorry, a civil war in another nation or in another country. Okay, so they will hack their ICS systems, for example, and cut off the electricity, as we just said, and at the same time, it won't reflect on the human machine interfaces, or from the company perspective. But at the same time, they don't know what's going on here. So everybody gonna think, hey, I think they are robbing us. So we are paying without getting electricity, right? And then a civil war will literally just gonna start. Okay, the same for water. Okay, they can literally just do the same with water. You can have your water cut. You will not even have a drop of water because of this. They can also do the same with the oil. It's actually more dangerous, because I can have an insider inside an oil infrastructure or an oil industry, okay, or a fueling system. I can, from my perspective, turn the leak detection off, okay, or something like that. And then I'm going to tell, uh, you know, my insider inside this infrastructure, hey, the leak detection is now turned off. You can safely go and do the damage, and simply the damage will happen. Nobody gonna notice any leak because it's already off. Okay, and the problem is not people don't pay attention to the security of it. The problem is that vendors and developers do not even know what to do with that. I interacted and communicated with many IoT and ICS and IIoT, etc., vendors. Okay, let me tell you that most of them were talking about, or were arguing about, the vulnerability without even understanding them. Like, for example, I'm talking about, hey, the access control rules that you have on this specific device is not correct, okay? Because there is nothing like with guest session, for example, you can control over the leak detection. You should be at least authenticated, if not administrator. But by doing this, you are actually destroying infrastructures. And they were talking about, no, that's how we built the system, so it is not a vulnerability. What? I'm not telling you to that this is itself this vulnerability itself is a vulnerability according to your system logic, because there is a very big problem here and a very big security gap between developers and technical people from a cybersecurity perspective, which is simply they don't understand the difference between um, you know the vulnerability because of the application logic, which is the application logical vulnerability, for example, or a logical vulnerability by design, or the the insecure design itself. There is a big difference between an insecure design and a vulnerability in the design. A vulnerability in the design, for example, your system is designed to, control the people within a specific infrastructure to make X control boundaries, etc., etc. This is a system design, okay? And if you failed to set that uh, 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 rules or to set these rules correctly, then that's a vulnerability in your system design. But the insecure design itself is something different. The insecure design is that the design that you've made is not simply correct. So simply you can get hacked because of this. You're thinking that you're secure because the design is working as intended. But what if your design itself is insecure? And that's the problem that I face with many people there. Um, Last thing is, which is also another security problem because you mentioned that, okay, um, the business sometimes interferes with the security or the secure life cycle of development. They want to sell more. They want to, speed up the process, and they want also to speed up the sales, right? And because of this, sometimes they push the developers ahead. They push them too hard just to make the system to make the system well designed, so they can, for example, do the marketing for the system. We have the best system, and we are literally just, the best in this industry, etc., etc. But when you interact with the system, maybe from a functional side, it will be good, but from the side of the security or the security side, it will be just not good at all. It's going to be insecure.
And we face the same problem within our world, within Samurai, right? Whilst we do work within the IoT and ICS space, the primary area that we work in is within the digital realm, the web applications, the APIs, the user interfaces that people use. You go onto a website, you log in. That's our world mostly. It's code, syntax. This world is physical, but in our daily lives, we see so many companies and systems that are developed quickly, don't follow best practice, and are pushed to market. And then they test it right at the end, not throughout, not at the start. They don't think about security through the design of it. They just build. Right, let's ship. Oh, governance tells us before we ship, we've got to do a pen test. Ow. Do we have to? Yeah, you do. The FCA regulate it, or, the healthcare equivalent regulate it. And then you have to unravel a beast and find things. And Moment, you found many criticals in your time because it was never thought about in the first place. And that's a commercial mindset. And whilst all businesses need to make money, otherwise why would they exist, unless it's a non-for-profit or a charity, there's a big financial incentive to move fast. There's a huge advantage strategically, something called the first mover's advantage, the first to the market with a product. Well, who's going to build a monopoly? And it seems to me that looking at the the core issue is that the focus is on functionality and sales rather than security. And I'm not saying that they should forget about sales, forget about functionality, and just focus on security, because then maybe the product might be bad, right? But it needs to be considered from the get-go rather than bolting it on at the end. And something as well that I want to ask you on this subject. We know that within fintech and healthcare industries where we work in the most, naturally we're in high demand in those industries because they hold sensitive data, credit card details, healthcare data. That's things that hackers want to steal and sell on the dark web. It's natural, of course they do. I don't agree with it, but you if you're going to hack something, go for the bank with the largest amount of money and not just the post office down the road. And they get access to the data. But within ICS systems and operational technology within these industries, it seems to me that the focus isn't on sensitive data, but on causing damage and disruption, rather than stealing something out of it. Now, what kind of motivations or groups would want to do that? Are we talking like nation state attacks? Because it can't really financially benefit the hacking organization to manipulate this, surely, unless they are financially benefited by the impacts of it. If they hack a competitor, then their oil prices go down, but the competitors go down and theirs go up. So do you have any thoughts or ideas on why these attacks even happen in the first place?
Okay, so during the dark web intelligence operations that we do, sometimes we do live literally in dark web just to see how these people are actually thinking. So it's a philosophical side actually. People who are attacking banks or financial systems are actually seeking for money. Okay, people, for example, who are attacking governments, etc., are seeking for data and persistence, like apt groups. Okay, people who are attacking, the healthcare industries, etc., are actually maybe ransomware groups that they do know that these kind of industries will pay and must pay to save lives, so they get the highest possibility of getting paid, because when you are operating a ransomware group, for example, so you are not just building a ransomware and attacking, you are making a case study first. So for example, a case study: if I attack this specific organization, what's the percentage of them, of the possibility of them paying me the ransom that I asked for? Okay, so for example, if I attack the school, they don't care. Okay, so it's about 20% of the school is gonna pay me. Okay, if I attacked, for example, a government, well, even though there is a little bit of a chance that they are going to pay you, but you will risk yourself getting closer to the jail. So sometimes it's a risk assessment, even in the black hat world, between the benefit, the reward, and the risk itself. Okay, but let's say you attacked, as a ransomware group, for example, you attacked a hospital. Simply, they must pay, and even in hours. Okay, so that's from the perspective of from hospitals. Now let's talk about the ICS and OT, IIoT, etc., etc. So when we think about it, we'll find that the people who are attacking these kind of infrastructures are seeking for the domination. So think about it like that. A nation want to destroy other nation, or a state want to destroy other state, etc., etc. How do you think they are going to do this? If they spend like the old days, rockets, missiles, etc., etc., it will be just, it will cost more than it will give the attacking nation. Okay, it will cost a lot. Okay, maybe $1,000 per rocket. Okay,
A
but
lot more
now
than that, I think. Millions per rocket.
yeah, exactly, maybe. Okay, now think about it from this perspective. If I want to wage a war against another nation, the cheapest way, and to be honest with you, the most effective way to do it will be the cyber world. But I cannot attack their banks directly. I cannot attack their governments directly, because think about it like that. I attack the banks, they are going to stop the attack, right? And no consequences in most cases, surely, because every attack is unique, but no consequences will be there after attacking a bank. Okay, I'm going to attack the government infrastructure. It's gonna be the same. Okay, but let's assume that I attacked an OT critical infrastructure like a water and oil, etc., etc. If I caused leak, okay, it will have a lot of consequences, and maybe these consequences will be literally just irreversible. Okay, I'm going to cause leakage, so everything will be burned. Okay, maybe also I can just do massive attack on the water industries or the water infrastructure. Like for example, let's say I discovered an RCE on a specific device. Okay, I jumped on that device, I removed literally everything on it, even the root file that controls the kernel itself, etc., etc. So even if you tried to attack, or sorry, if you try to fix that device, it will be in most cases impossible, because simply the device itself is programmed to receive a firmware, etc., etc. Some device will not get that firmware through hardware itself, the hardware itself, because as you know, when you upload a new firmware, for example, or firmware, you have two options: to upload it through the software itself, or to upload it through the hardware itself, like using USB device, USB stick, etc., etc. So think about it like that. Maybe the device itself will not be able to even receive the new firmware, because me as an attacker, I completely destroyed it. From this perspective, I completely brick the device. Okay, so if I brick the device, even from a software bricking perspective, like for example,
Big mistake.
yeah, exactly, just for example, disturbing the firmware update intentionally, while doing it, etc., etc. So the chip itself will be bricked, literally. Okay, so these people that are attacking these kind of infrastructures, in most cases they are nation delivered sorry, nation derived people. Okay,
Like nation
nation,
sponsored.
yeah, nation sponsored, exactly,
Mm.
nation sponsored people. Okay, that nations are actually training them, and even sometimes they uh, during my dark web intelligence, sometimes you even have malicious inside the cyber world. Like for example, they don't follow any nation. Okay, but if you want to pay for them and they are going to exploit the 0 days, etc., etc., they will simply do it. I've seen this a lot in the Russian groups of, or attacking groups. Okay, so yeah, they are nation sponsored people, and in some cases they are also political sponsored, or politics related people. Like for example, let's say Russia attacked Ukraine, or Ukraine attacked Russia. Okay, so the people that stands with Russia or Ukraine, they are going to stand with the party that they are actually agreeing with them. Okay, or even having an empathy with them. And let me give you now a secret that not everybody actually knows. Sometimes they even do something called the psych operations. Okay, so what is that? Simply, let's say they have attacked a governmental website, or even an OT infrastructure. Okay, so they are not going to tell you, hey, we are apt, let's say 99. Okay, and we claim this attack, and we say that the only system we attacked is the water system, and the only thing that we were able to do is to turn the water on or off. They're not going to say that at all. Okay, what they're going to say is, we have attacked the whole infrastructures nation, critical infrastructures. Okay, and during this, we were able to compromise every single device in the ICS and or the OT infrastructure, including the electricity, gas, oil, and even the water itself. We have total and full control on every single device and on the infrastructure. Okay, and we are now waging a new internal war against the nation itself from these infrastructures, which calls the psychological operations. Okay, so
Yeah.
it's actually very very deep when you think about it.
Yeah,
Okay.
and the impact is huge as well. I mean, but on the first, at the face value, it just seems to be damage. But then it's looking at what's the impact of that damage, and how could that be used as leverage. There's leverage in terms of military power, and those who hold the most bombs and the highest, the largest military often have more control. Whoever's the biggest and the strongest can walk into a room and have an impact and get their way. Whereas, like you say, this kind of fighting is not with missiles or with infantry. It's with what you could do. And if there was a nation state that had the ability to cut off water, electricity, wipe out a nation's digital infrastructure, that is far more impactful than just dropping bombs, and it takes far less resource, right? So not only is it easier, it's worse. And it reminds me actually, there's a movie that you may or may not have watched. If you haven't, I recommend anybody to watch it. It's called Leave the World Behind. I think you can find it on Netflix, but it's essentially talking about what would happen if the US came under a nationwide cyber attack that hit all of the national critical infrastructure, water, power, energy. And at the start, everyone was just going crazy. What's going on? I don't have power anymore. Where's the Wi-Fi? The TV doesn't work anymore. But after an extended period of time, days turn into weeks, weeks turn into months, that isolation and communication between people would mean that it would isolate communities. People were left in the dark about what happened. It would spread misinformation. No one could understand what was going on, and eventually, you fast forward, financial systems collapse. People don't have money. Well, then how do you buy food? Then there's supply chain issues. You don't get access to food. All of a sudden, there's scarcity of resources. And that scarcity of all critical resources escalates tensions. People have to form groups and bands, and then there's tension. And without going too far into and spoiling the movie for you, essentially it's all out war, but not from one country to another. It's the country is at war with itself, and it destroys itself from the inside out because the people have to fight to survive and live. And effectively, you can just destroy a whole country and step back and not have to do anything. It'll destroy itself. That's more powerful than any weapon that's ever been used in the history of mankind, as far as I'm aware. And that may not all be down to insecure operational technology or ICS systems, but it does play a huge part. And there's lots of different, in my view, responsibilities that are in place here, from the manufacturers to the implementers and to the users as well, to think about security. But talking generally speaking, Momen, there must be some kind of solution in place to securing ICS systems. We can't just continue building a world on a deck of cards that could tumble and fall at any time. There must be some short-term things that we can do to mitigate risk. And what are the slightly longer-term ones that you can think of?
From this perspective, I think the short-term thing that we can do is preventing our industrial IoTs, ICS devices and systems, SCADA systems from being just, publicly accessible, especially if they are on premise, because that's a very big problem. Because people don't realize how many botnets and scanners, internet scanners, are exist in this world. They are a lot. How many people that want to get 0 days, for example, on some specific systems are exist in this world? They are everywhere. Okay, everybody want to get a 0 day on a specific system. So simply, it will just go, hey, Franklin Fuel system, for example, or one of the uh, huge manufacturers of ICS and OT devices in the world. Okay, like for example, there are a lot of them globally. Okay, so simply the short-term solution is do not expose your infrastructure to the world, even if you believe it's secure. Okay, because simply when you do this, you allow many people to attack your infrastructure. Okay, but now what about a longer term? Okay, in a longer term solution, just secure the code as you do with anything. Okay, because when you think about it, okay, previously one of the reasons that made IoT and SCADA security, sorry, IIoT for industrial IoT and SCADA and OT security is not that common because they were inaccessible. And when you make something inaccessible, so yes, you are preventing it from being manipulated, and yes, you make the people realize that that thing does not even exist, but at the same time, the world around you will be moving forward towards security because they are getting hacked, so they are actually securing themselves, etc., etc. Okay, but you think in your, in your small hut that no, I'm secure, my device is secure, so simply nobody can hack it. Okay, then when you realize that you should connect your device to the internet because hey, now I have to get more engaged in the world of internet, etc., etc., so let me plug my ICS or OT device inside to the internet so I can access from abroad, etc., etc., you will realize that you are very, very outdated from a security perspective. Why? Because you do not run security assessments or enough security assessments against your ICS infrastructure. So when you plug it to the internet, you will have millions of botnets, thousands of security attackers just attacking your device, and simply it will be hacked because during hiding your device you thought, so my device is secure because nobody attacked it. But no, no sir, it is not secure because nobody attacked it. It's secure because you hid the device from the people that can hack it. Okay, so I'm saying this because some people gonna think, hey, if we did the short term solution for this, we'll be like, yeah, that's the best thing that we can do, is not going to cost us a lot, etc., etc., so let's just rely on the short term solution, let's not expose our devices to the internet. And that's totally wrong. Okay, I'm saying this because this is gonna be, like a bridge between the insecure and the secure infrastructure. So you cannot be attacked continuously while developing a secure solution. So the first thing that you should do is protect your device from being exposed to the internet if they are not really in a desire, or if you are not really in a desire need to make them exposed to the internet. So simply please do not. Okay, and then start to develop your devices in a secure way. And by the way, I think I discovered a 0 day before in one of the fuel management systems. Okay, it was an out of band file system rewrite. It was quite interesting actually because there is something by design in C and C++. When you deal with C and C++ on a Unix system, so simply when you come to open, for example, a binary file, so you are going to use a programmatical function called fopen. So it's simply a function that opens a file, but you just specify what kind of file that you are going to open. So for example, if you are going to open for manipulation, a binary file, so you specify B for binary. If it's gonna be an ASCII or text file, it's gonna be also another representative, etc., without going deeply into the technical details. Okay, so fortunately, okay, they were using a Unix-based system. Okay, which means you can literally pretty much just rewrite any file, even if they said no, the only file that will be manipulated should be a binary file. And at the same time, there was a path traversal vulnerability on that device. So by combining these together, I created an attack chain. I even wrote it down inside a paper called uh, pre-compromise privilege escalation, or pre-access privilege escalation, pre-RCE privilege escalation, something like that. It's actually on my LinkedIn profile. Um, and simply, it's like a chain to rewrite the etc passwd file to add a backdoor user by uploading a firmware. So the firmware should be a binary file, right? And the system itself should only open binary files or even rewrite them. But because there is a bug, so simply you can literally just rewrite any kind of file, even if that file was a test file. And this actually because the Unix system will not care about what kind of file you are going to open. It will just gonna open it when using C or C++. So this understanding of insecurity by design, or to be vulnerable by design, is very important. Okay, so if we can educate ourselves with that, if we can do regular security assessments, code reviews, infrastructure testing, etc., attack simulation, cyber war simulation, at least to train ourselves on how can we, you know, function under a cyber war to reduce the risks and the attacks, etc., it will be just beneficial.
Well, there's quite a lot to be said on where the responsibility lies, because a lot of the time, the people that use operational technology and industrial control systems, the ones that implement it on the site, are not the same people who manufacture it. The manufacturers are different. They're the builders, they plug the pieces together, they put it in a box and they ship it out. And then a fueling company will then unpack it and install it, implement the systems, implement the software, connect it all up, and then they use it. Two very different things. And not only is it not built securely from the manufacturing perspective, and it needs to be considered in the research and development side, but when people are implementing it on site, they don't have the expertise to implement it securely. They don't understand. They just go, right, step one, plug it in, connect it to the internet so I can connect with it through the web app and monitor it. And the people just from creating through to implementing don't have the correct level of training, right? They don't know to segment OTs from the corporate network. They don't know to regularly check for patches or restrict internet exposure. But all of these things, whilst critical, I think we need to address something that's more at a high level when securing OT and Internet of Things technologies, is that you look at industries of today and you consider the National Infrastructure Directive, and there are specific regulatory frameworks that force companies to adhere to certain requirements. We work with companies that only do pen testing once a year because they're mandated to. That's the rules. It's the law. They provide financial services, so they have to do it. But they only do it because they need to. And whilst, yes, culturally that's incorrect, there's ethical and moral concerns with that approach. Within the ICS and the OT, national critical infrastructures, there isn't that level of governance and regulation in place. So not only aren't people not doing it, that's the issue, but they're not being forced to. And there is really no punishment for not adhering to security best practices. So I think the bigger picture from an industrial view, the strategic view, is that robust cybersecurity standards need to be put in place. Think ISO 27001, but for operational technology within national infrastructure, both from manufacture and for implementation. And not only do those frameworks need to be developed, because I believe some of them are, and I've spoken to people at events who have contributed to those frameworks, but they're not mandated. People don't get punished if they don't comply with them. There's no penalties, so why bother? They may build it to best practice, but there's no, it's not forced. So I think all of those solutions, whilst they're important, even if there's a guidebook on how to do it, people may not follow it because it's cost prohibitive. It costs money to invest in security. And if you can cut corners and make more profit as a result of that, businesses will find the shortest path to profit. They always do, but they can't get around it if that industry is, mandated. And maybe then the next level up, if we can foster better relationships between public and private sectors, or probably better put, manufacturers and implementers, and promote a little bit more of a joining between those two industries, so the makers can educate the implementers and vice versa. And by facilitating that communication, maybe it'll just help everything be better designed from the ground up, and maybe it'll help each other. We can't understate the importance of training and collaboration within this area, especially if that's complemented by regulation and research and development. I'm sure you'll agree there's not enough research in this area of the market to effectively mitigate these vulnerabilities. The very fact they're internet facing, and the very fact that Momen, as you have done before, can log on to a system and find a critical vulnerability that's never been found before on a real life industrial control system, the very fact that that is the case and that can happen indicates there's a huge lack of investment in security research and development for these technologies. And considering the importance of them in our day-to-day lives, personally, I'm ashamed and appalled at the wider industry and the fact that this isn't talked about more and it's not made a priority. And I think that we as security endorsers and people that really care about this subject and our community and our world and other people, it's something that we have a responsibility to push as well. And in fact, we are pushing it as a business within Samurai. We're contributing to security frameworks within these sectors, but it's very difficult for a small private cybersecurity company to make a large impact on a global scale and force frameworks to be put in place. But I think for me, as long as we're moving the needle a little bit towards progress and doing the part we can and spreading the message like we are today on a podcast, maybe we'll have one person listening at some point in the future that could make a change. And maybe we're part of something that catalyzes a movement towards a safer and more secure future. That's all we can do. We've only got 8 hours of the working day. Well, 12 for us, but the normal folk, there's only 24 hours in a day, and we can only do so much. But as a collective, as an industry, we can make a change, and we're partly responsible for that. And I think that on that bombshell is the perfect time to close off today's episode. I mean, we've been here for an hour, and I have a feeling we've got another hour in us, and we should definitely save that for the next episode, where we dive deeper into the types of attacks that can be performed on industrial control systems, and just go into a deeper level of technical understanding of this area. And that's when things are going to get exciting. So I'd like to take the opportunity to thank you, Momen, for his time and expertise. It's been a pleasure having you on the show, Momen. Thank you so much. I hope you've enjoyed your stay. Have you had a good time?
Yeah, sure, 100%. I always having a good time speaking about technical stuff.
Good. And I would also like to thank the listeners for sticking around so long. If you've made it to the hour mark, congratulations. And as always, I'll see you again on the next episode. Speak to you soon. Bye-bye.